Well, welcome to our topic on using and creating review materials. You've probably heard your professor or a classmate say that it's really important to outline your courses. They probably say memorize the rules, make sure you put the rules in an outline, and keep your outline current as you work through your courses. And perhaps you don't know what that means, or you don't know what an outline should contain, or you don't know how to best create an outline. Well, I'm here to help you with that. Not only outlines, but other review materials as well. Outlines, flowcharts, flashcards, and a little bit to talk about commercial materials that are already out there that you don't need to create, that have already been created, that you might be able to use to your benefit as you review and as you study. I want to point out that if you happen to be viewing this lecture at the end of your studies, and you have not created review materials so far, that's okay. You can catch up. It's just going to take you some time and a whole lot of effort. If you're lucky enough to be viewing this lecture at the beginning of your courses, and you have not yet started to review a great deal of material in your classes yet, then you are at the right place at the right time. Because it's important that you start this process now so that it doesn't become completely overwhelming to you. And it will help you as you move through the courses, and it'll help you study as you finish your courses as well. So let's talk first about course outlines. Course outlines are basically just keeping an outline of all of the material that you cover to highlight the most important aspects that you need to remember as you work through the course. Okay, the most important points, the most important topics, the most important issues, the most important elements, the rules, if you will, that you'll learn, the rules of law as you go through each topic, you're going to need to know. You're going to need to memorize them in order to do well on your exams. So the ultimate goal of creating a course outline is to express your understanding of the law as you go to class, as you read your books, etc. It's to help memorize or internalize the rules of law. When I say internalize the rule of law, I don't mean regurgitating simple sentences. Okay, I mean truly understanding, internalizing the rules of law in a way that allows you to repeat them with a full understanding. And it's also great to use as an organizational tool, okay, meaning that there are so much material that you're going to be covering in each course that it's going to be very important for you to organize it and understand how it all fits together. So creating a course outline. What is not in an outline? Well, definitely we don't want to put in, procedural history, policy type arguments, a treatise on how to, approach the law or the history of law. All we really want is the meat. And when I say meat, I mean the rules, certain maybe some cases that you find important that will help you remember how those rules are applied, and some important points that might say remember that students often mistake this for that. Don't do that. So pointers. Those are the types of things that you want to include. You don't want to simply cut and paste from every paragraph from your book and put it into an outline. Not everything in your book needs to be memorized. Keep the stuff that you should memorize, exclude the stuff that you don't need to memorize. You don't need to memorize case names. You don't need to memorize citations. You don't need to memorize the problems that are in your case book. Any kind of interpretation, that kind of thing. Just the important stuff that is going to be important to you to hold on at the very end of the course. And we'll talk a little bit more about this as we go through this lecture. Okay, keep it simple and add to it as you learn. So the point is to organize what you're learning from all of your resources into one manageable document that you can review. That's why I don't want you to cut and paste from your book and just completely rewrite your book into an outline. That's completely unmanageable. Okay, we want to come up with maybe, let's say, 30 to 40 pages for each subject. Okay, everything that you've learned from each subject, let's organize it into a manageable outline. The goal is to be able to use it as a review tool to help you study for your final exams. So it's going to contain the rules, it's going to contain your understanding of how to apply them, and you should create an outline for each course you take. Okay, so the spiral notebooks are down here in an image just to show you that maybe we have one spiral notebook for contracts, maybe we have one for torts, maybe we have one for criminal law, we've got one for constitutional law, one for criminal procedure, etc. Okay, so if you're taking 3 courses at a time, then have 3 spiral notebooks, one for each course, and keep up with them as you go. That's how we want it to work. Right? Don't include case names, citations, procedural history, all that stuff that I said that's not in an outline. You don't need long descriptions of case facts. Okay? You don't need to know those for later. Instead, you just need to be able to remember the rules and apply them. That's the whole point. So after you identify a topic and a rule that you need to remember, you should write the rule, include any exceptions, and then include an example or a short summary of a case to help you remember how the issue is raised and to understand how the rules apply. We don't need lengthy histories of the rules, and we don't need long discussions on the underlying policies. Every once in a while, it's important to put a policy in there, simply because it might help you understand, why the rule is what it is, or it might help guide some of your analysis or your arguments, if you have an exam. But a lengthy discussion of policies is not needed. So where in the world do you start? How do you start writing your outlines? So how do you start your outlines? First, look to your hornbook or your casebook and find the table of contents, the main book that you're working from. Okay, I usually like to start with the book that my professor likes to use in class to organize the material. Okay, so look at your course syllabus. Does it tell you that this week in class you're going to be discussing pages 525 through 536 of your hornbook? Okay, or your casebook? What is it? And use that table of contents from that book that guides you through your classes as a skeleton for your outline. Okay, so the format is already there for you. Just cut and paste it into your outline. And don't freak out about how long it is. Just do it. It's going to serve, as I said, as a skeleton of your outline, and you'll simply fill in the rules and the examples as you go. So if you're lucky enough to have that detailed syllabus, you can use it in connection with this table of contents so that you can fill in your outline in the order each topic is discussed in class. Okay, if not, then just use the outline table of contents as is and jump around. Fill it in as you discuss contracts formation, fill it in as you discuss performance and remedies, etc. But look at, the fact that you're discussing contract overview and formation, and then within that topic, you're going to put things like mutual assent, offer, acceptance, consideration, absence of defenses, all of that good stuff. You're going to find it in your table of contents and create your outline as you go. But that's how you start, is with your table of contents. So then we're going to add rule statements. Rule statements, oh gosh, where do you get them? Okay, they're going to come from your readings. They're going to come from your lectures. They're going to come from black letter law outlines. They're going to come from your hornbooks. They're going to come from the cases. They're going to come from all sorts of places. And you're going to notice that they're all stated differently. And that's because there's a million ways to state each rule. Okay, for battery, we can call battery an intentional touching that causes harm or offense. Or we can say that a battery is where one volitionally so voluntarily touches another with intent that causes harm or causes offense. So there's a million different ways to say the same thing. And I don't want you to get stuck with an idea that there is one right way to say these rules, okay, or to state these rules. Instead, I want you to study, work through your readings, work through your class lectures, work through all this stuff, and decide internalize it, understand it. And once you understand it, then write the rule that makes the most sense to you. It might already be out there in existence in your reading or lecture, or it might be something completely created by you that makes sense. For example, in contracts, there are so many rules to what a contract is, and they are stated in so many different ways. Which one do you choose? I came up with my own. It's it's a legally enforceable agreement. That's 3 words. A legally enforceable agreement. You'll see a rule for a contract that takes a paragraph to state what the rule is. That doesn't make sense to me. I mean, it makes sense. I understand it. But what's easy for me to memorize is my little 3-letter rule, right? A legally enforceable agreement. And that encompasses all 5 sentences of everything that I've learned. And if I need to break that down, I can absolutely talk about what those 5 sentences are and what they mean. But if I just need to memorize it, I'm memorizing the rule that a contract is a legally enforceable agreement. Done. And what does that mean? And then you can discuss that as you work through the explanations, the little short summaries that help you remember what that means, okay, or how it applies. So that's what I mean about adding rule statements. Don't get freaked out about what is the absolute correct rule. What I do want you to focus on, though, is the elements. Now we're getting into essential elements. Almost every rule that you encounter, well, I'll just say most of the rules that you encounter, are going to contain some type of element. For example, when we go back to battery, I said that a battery is an intentional touching that causes harm or offense. The elements, therefore, of battery are intent, touching, and harm or offense. You've got those 3 elements there, and in order to prove a battery, you have to show that all 3 of those elements exist. If one of those is missing, you do not have a battery. So in your outline, when you're stating your rule statement, you're putting a rule statement for battery in your outline, you must make sure that all 3 of those elements are included in your rule statement. I don't care how you say it, just make sure that they're all in there. So that's sorry I went off on a little tangent there. That's my tangent on rule statements. Don't let them overwhelm you just because there's so many of them and just because they're stated in so many different ways. Just learn them, state them in a way that makes sense to you, make sure that they contain all the elements, and memorize it. Done. Adding rule statements. So here's my example. If you're looking to define battery, for example, your syllabus might say, you read 40 pages in the casebook, you read 40 pages in the hornbook, and you attend class with your professor. Okay, so what definition is common among all those sources? Generally, in all 3 of those sources, you will find common elements. Like I said, every single rule that you'll encounter has to contain the element of intent, touching, and harm or offense. Okay, so think about what definition is common in all these sources. What definition did your professor give in class? And that common definition is going to be the rule of law that goes into your outline. Okay, you'll also find rule statements if it helps you. Maybe when taking quizzes in the answer keys, if you complete an essay, you might find the rule statement in the model answer. Okay, and your professor will always discuss the rules in class. Again, you don't have to create any rule that is common to everyone. You don't have to create the perfect rule, and you might take it from a quiz answer or a model answer, or just use what the professor gave you in class. Whatever is easiest for you, that's the rule that you're going to use. Just make sure that it makes absolute sense to you. So let's talk about what a part of an outline might look like. Again, we'll take battery as an example. With battery, our rule, here's another way to state the rule, is a voluntary act that causes harmful or offensive contact with another, and the actor intended to cause that contact. Okay, see how that is the same thing as saying an intentional touching that causes harm or offense. It's the same thing. Okay, so we take each one of those elements. Okay, the voluntary act, you define that here. That means acting with volition as opposed to without volition, involuntarily. Okay, harmful or offensive contact, define what that means. With another, and then intent. So we're bringing out each one of the elements from that rule. So that is your battery. And then you're going to see cases. Maybe there's a case that talks about whether the act is voluntary or not. Okay, the case that I happen to remember is one where someone is having a seizure, and they don't have control of their body, and they end up hitting the plaintiff, okay, with their hand. It wasn't a voluntary act, so it's not a battery. Make sense? So that helps me remember how to apply that element. So perhaps in my outline, under battery and voluntary act, after I define the rule and its elements, I write voluntary act, and then I say epilepsy case. It's not voluntary if you're having an epileptic seizure. It's voluntary if you intend to raise your hand, if you intend to touch. Okay, so again, intentional touching that causes harm or offense to another. So outlines are important because when taking exams, you gather points by spotting issues, having complete and accurate rule statements, and it helps you analyze the facts. So if you get an essay question, okay, on an exam, and you see a fact that shows that someone is hit by another person having an epileptic seizure, you want to discuss battery. Okay, it raises the issue for you. It helps you spot the issue. Okay, so now you've spotted the issue of battery. You've also spotted the issue of volition. Okay, and now you know how to analyze it because you'll remember that case, and you'll be able to say, like in that case, that wasn't a voluntary act, therefore there was no battery. Here, the same thing is present. Okay, so that's why an outline is important. It's going to help you spot those issues. It's going to help you memorize those complete and accurate rule statements. It's going to help you analyze the facts. It's going to help you do better on exams. Okay, it's also going to help you organize that material. So it's going to expand and contract as your knowledge grows and you memorize the material. Okay, so you might find that you have put way too much information in there. Okay, and your knowledge is now greater, and you know what's important and you know what's not. So you might go into your outline and cut a little bit out of it. All right, and of course it's going to expand as you add rules, okay, and as you add explanations, and as you add other material that helps you remember and understand. And then at the end of the day, you got to memorize that outline. Okay, much easier to memorize 20, 30, 40 pages than it is to memorize an entire Hornbook or casebook. Okay, so memorizing your outline is going to help you earn higher scores by helping you to quickly spot issues and recite complete and accurate rule statements. The faster that you can recall a rule statement and write it on an exam, the less time you'll spend thinking, now what was that rule? And losing valuable time that you really should be using when analyzing the rule instead of trying to remember what it was. So that's outlines. Another important review tool that we use that I personally like, and most visual learners like these as well, are flowcharts. Okay, flowcharts. So for example, in a torts flowchart, okay, and you can make flowcharts from your outlines, by the way. You don't have to use one or the other. You can use a variety, whatever it is that you need here. So a flowchart is where you take a topic and you break it down into its parts, okay, and you show visually how they are organized. So for example, torts is broken up into the study of intentional torts, the study of negligence, the study of strict liability, and then finally defamation and privacy torts. So as you go through your torts course, you're probably going to learn intentional torts first. Then you'll learn about negligence, then strict liability, etc. So we take torts, then we look at intentional torts, and then we break down intentional torts further. Okay? Or we break down negligence further. So with negligence, you start with, again, so we've got torts. Let's say that we've completed intentional torts. We get to negligence. Let's list the elements of negligence: duty, breach, causation, and damages. Okay? Then you break it down further and you talk about what is duty? How is a duty defined? How do you prove breach? Okay? How do you prove causation? What are the actual and proximate cause? There's two. Okay? How do you show damages? Okay? An example of a contracts flowchart is with contract formation, perhaps, because contracts are divided into formation, performance, and remedies. We'll learn that, especially if you're going through our review courses in essential elements. But formation, you break it down into mutual assent, consideration, and defenses to formation. Mutual assent is made up through the process of offer and acceptance. Consideration is a bargained for exchange. Okay, sometimes you can have a substitute for consideration, which might be promissory estoppel, or in the absence of consideration, you might be able to recover under restitution or quasi-contractual theory. Okay, and then finally, defenses to formation. And then, we know what our defenses are: statute of frauds, mistake, duress, unconscionability, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so that's an example contracts flowchart. So why use these? Again, some students remember materials better when working with relationships. Okay, how do these topics tie together? What's the big picture? What's the forest? I know all the individual trees, but I need to see the forest. Okay, or I need to see the puzzle picture that's on top of the puzzle box instead of each one of these little individual puzzle pieces. Okay, so put those puzzle pieces into a flowchart that when you look at it as a whole, you can see that forest, or you can see the puzzle box. Okay. Flowcharts shows in a concrete way the interrelationship between differing concepts. Perhaps you might have trouble understanding the difference between additional terms contained in an acceptance and contract modifications. And you get them confused, and you don't know which one applies where. If you have a flowchart, you can see concretely that one applies in this situation and another one applies in the other situation. Okay, one applies at contract formation stage, the other one applies after the contract has been formed. All right, so it really helps you understand the organization of the topics. So just find what works best for you and your learning style and develop the tools that you need. Flashcards. So flashcards is another review tool that I really appreciate. And I use this one to help memorize the rules. Okay, memorizing the rules is so important. You cannot spot issues unless you've memorized the rules. Okay, you cannot analyze a problem unless you've memorized the rules. So flashcards are going to help you. It's going to be a memorization tool primarily. Okay, so on a 3x5 note card, on the front side, write the rule that you're defining, battery. And then on the second side, write the definition: a voluntary act that causes harmful or offensive contact with another and the actor intended to cause that contact. Or your rule statement. Perhaps it's an intentional touching that causes harm or offense, whatever it happens to be. However, you've decided to memorize your rule. Put them on note cards. Note cards, we're making flashcards here. So why to use them? They're easy to carry around. You can get to memorizing anytime, anywhere. You can work with others, which is also fun to do. Repetition is so important to memorization. Okay, testing yourself. It's a tactile way to imprint the information that you're memorizing. And by the way, if you're looking at some of the pictures on these slides, that's Professor Dennis Tonsing. He does the introductory lectures, the pre-law lectures for essential elements. So if you sign up for one of his courses, you'll get to see Professor Tonsing talking about the importance of review materials, the importance of preparing for law school, and he'll get into some detail about helping you learn how to IRAC, learn how to brief cases, learn how to, make outlines, all sorts of good stuff. Okay, so Professor Tonsing is the gentleman that you're seeing in that blue jacket in some of these pictures. So it's easy to add to your stack of flashcards when you come across a new and important term. And again, kind of fun to test yourself. Use it in your study groups. Make a game out of it. Finally, commercial materials. Let's talk about commercial materials really quickly. Commercial materials, I mean commercial outlines. They're put out by Kaplan, they're put out by Barbary, they're put out by Gilbert's, Emmanuel's, all sorts of commercial outlines are out there. You'll even find some in essential elements. I would never say don't use them because I think that they are helpful. However, so let me tell you why I think they're helpful. I think they're helpful after you have done the work of putting your own outline and or flashcards and or flowcharts together. It helps you check your work. Make sure that you're not missing anything. Okay, double check to make sure that you are on the right page. Also helpful to show you kind of what's important and what's not. All right, if it's in the commercial outline, probably important stuff because commercial outlines are a lot smaller than your case books and your horn books. What I don't want you to do is use your commercial materials as a substitute for your course materials. You should be reading through your entire casebook. Yes, it's true. You should be briefing cases. You should be reading your horn books. You should be attending your lectures. You should be doing the hard work. You cannot simply pick up a commercial outline for contracts, memorize it, and think that you know and understand contracts. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. I wish it did. It'd be a whole lot easier, but it doesn't. So use commercial outlines if you like and if you find them helpful, but make sure that you do your own work first and then check your work with your commercial materials or help them guide your work as you create your own outlines. Finally, I want you to be an active learner, as I said, and create your own materials because that does help with the internalization that you're going to need, that memorization process. It's not just memorizing, it's internalizing. So if you're just passively reading what somebody else wrote, it's not conducive to learning or memorize. So those provisos, many students, especially in the first year, find comfort in knowing that they're on the right track. Okay, so using commercial materials as a backup plan, a way to double check your own work, is a really great way to use those outside materials. So good luck. Happy studying. If you need anything at all, be sure to reach out. And if you're a beginning law student and you need help learning how to IRAC, learning how to brief cases, learning how to read cases, all of that good stuff, you can find more materials in the Academic Resource Center. Good luck, guys. Bye-bye.